Hey guys, so in this video, we're going to be building some different user types and restricting pages based on whatever user is logged in and the permissions that they have. So right now, I'm going to log in as a user Dennis, and we're going to be able to see the admin level access pages here. So this is the main dashboard. This is the highest level access you can get. And this user is able to add new customers, place new orders, view products, and so on. But if I log out and log in as a customer, so in our system, John is a customer, John is going to get redirected to the customer profile page. So it's not built out now, but we'll finish this up later. So you'll notice that the navigation bars change here. So we're no longer able to see the main dashboard and the products page. And if John tries to view the products just by finding the URL, John is going to get this message here. So you are not authorized to view the page. So we're going to be restricted. And if we try to go to that main dashboard, we're going to get redirected back to the user page. So in the last video, we set restrictions on pages with this login required decorator here. So what we're going to do in this video is actually build our own and write our own functionality to redirect users on how we want them to be redirected and set our own restrictions. If you're here as a part of the Django Crash Course series, I'm just going to catch you up here and show you what I've built out before I started this video. So we have this user.html template, which just extended our main template here and has this h3 tag. So it's in our app accounts user.html. So make sure that's built out. And we have this view right here. So user page, and we just return that template, and our URL path is right here. So we have our user, and I'll just go ahead and log into the admin dashboard and show you the methods we're going to use right now. So if I go to /admin and we'll log in as the super user, in users right here, we are going to use the attributes that by default Django gives us. So when we use that create super user method in the beginning of the series, we had staff set to true and super user set to true also. And if I go to John, when we created this user with that login method, John has the attributes of staff and super status or super user status as false right now. So we're going to start with these methods right here and check these conditionals, but later we'll actually use groups for this. And that's just another way of doing this, and I'll explain later on why that's important. But let's go ahead and set up our decorators here. So we're going to create a file called, within our app here, called decorators.py. So let's go ahead and set that up, and I'll cover what these are briefly. This is more of a Python method, not Django, but I'll just do a recap if you're not familiar with them. So we'll do decorators.py, and we'll start building them out here. So I'll move this here and move our views to the right and close out our dashboard and URLs. So let's go ahead and make our first imports. So the first one's going to be from django.http import http response, and the next one's going to be from django.shortcuts import redirect. Okay, so the first decorator we're going to write is going to be something that stops an authenticated user from viewing the login and registered page. So what I mean by that is if a user is logged in, I don't want them to be able to go to the register page or the login page. So what happens right now is if I go to these pages, I get redirected, and we covered this in the last video where that functionality is written right here. So first we check if a user is authenticated, and if they're not, then we allow the page to show up, and we do the same for the login page here. So I don't want to have to write this conditional, and it gets really messy. I have to indent my code a bunch, and it can get really bad if I have a lot of pages. So what I'm going to do is write my first decorator, and we're going to call this one, let me just take a look at my notes here. So we're going to call it unauthenticated underscore user, and it's going to take in the view function. So I'll explain what's going on in a second, but we're going to call this view func. So follow along, build this out, and then I'll do a full recap. And then we need to make the inner function, so the wrapper function, and this is going to be called wrapper underscore func, and it's going to take in the request and then arguments and keyword arguments. So star args and star quargs. So star args and star quargs. And then we just need to go ahead and return that view function. So return view func, And the view function will take in the request and arguments also. And then we need to return the wrapper function. So this right here. So we'll just do return wrapper function. Okay, so we'll just create some spacing here, and I'll explain what a decorator is. So a decorator is a function that takes in another function in as a parameter and lets us add a little extra functionality before the original function is called. So it can be added to a function like this. So this is a view-based function. So if we do the @ symbol, like this built-in decorator that Django has for us, so if we do @unauthenticated user, what's happening here is this login page function is actually passed in right here. So viewfunc is login page in this case. So we call this function first, and we're able to write some conditionals, run some checks, and then call the view function. So it doesn't get executed until wrapper function is executed. So in our case, what we're going to do here is, I actually realized I removed that conditional, but go ahead, and if you are following along, you should have this conditional here. So if and then else. So we have this conditional right here. So what we're going to do is check in the view function, or in the decorator, this conditional. So we're going to do if request.user is authenticated, go ahead and send that user home. So we don't need this anymore. And if the user is authenticated or is not authenticated, then go ahead and call the original function. So we'll indent this, and then we can remove this else statement and backspace this. So I had to do a re-edit of this, so that's why we didn't have that originally. But now all we have is this decorator that gets called when this login page view is called. This conditional is checked, so that's what we had in here. And if the user is authenticated, we never actually call login page. So we just go ahead and redirect that user home. And if the user is not authenticated, then we return the view function. So the view function is a login page. So we go ahead and call this view and go ahead and execute everything down here. So I hope that makes sense. We add a decorator just by using this @ symbol, throw the decorator over it. And now if I import this and test it, so we're going to do from, and again, our decorators sit within our app accounts, right within our views here. So decorators, so we can do from dot decorators, import, and we'll just throw in authenticated user or unauthenticated user. And now if I turn on my server and refresh it, we should see that same functionality without having to write that conditional within our page here. So if I go to our page and to our login page, here we go, the decorator ran and it keeps us here and it does the same thing. So if I go ahead and log in as a user and then try viewing the login page, we get redirected back to our home page. So that's what the decorator is taking care of for us. So now I can go ahead and just add this to the register page. So we can erase this, backspace this, and throw the decorator above here, and we should get that same functionality. So now you'll notice our code is a lot cleaner. We just throw in a decorator and we don't have to write that conditional above here. So the next thing we'll do is write a decorator that goes on top of these pages. So right now we set each page to restricted, but we'll actually pass in some parameters into the decorator like this. So instead of login URL, we'll say allowed users, and then that decorator will run and see if that user is allowed to be on that page. So I know that in the beginning of the video, I said I was going to use these user attributes to create that authentication, but I actually realized that if we use this, it's going to make our decorator kind of static, and we want to make it a little bit more dynamic. So what we're going to use is this built-in Django Groups, and we're going to put users into certain groups and create authentication based on that. So in our case, I'm going to create a group called admin, and we'll create another group called customer. And in this case, a user can be part of multiple groups, so it can really make our authentication really dynamic. So once our file gets really big or our project gets big, you'll see where this can come into play. But let's go ahead and add Dennis to the admin group. So he's going to be part of the admins. And we'll throw John into the customer group. So that's kind of similar to this staff status and super status, or super user status, but basically what's happening here is we don't have to create an attribute each time we want to add another level of a user type. So we can just create another group for that and attach that user. So it's just a relationship between that. So let's go ahead and write the decorator. So this is going to be called allowed underscore users. And it's going to be a little different from this decorator right here because it's going to take in some parameters beyond this view function. So what we're actually going to do is create 3 layers of functions. So let's go ahead and say allowed underscore, or sorry, allowed equals, and it's just going to be a list. So allowed underscore roles. And that's just going to be a list that we're going to pass in. So a single page can allow multiple types of users. And within here, we're going to create our decorator. So we're just going to call it decorator. Even though this is going to be the decorator name when we call it in the views. But because we're passing in the parameters, now we're going to throw in the view function into here. So we're going to pass in allowed roles kind of like we did with this login URL. So we're going to do that. And then we can create our wrapper function. So we'll call that wrapper func. And it's going to be this one right here. So let's go ahead and just throw those in there and return the view function. So it's going to be the view function, and then we're going to return the wrapper function and the decorator. So this will take in request arguments and keyword arguments. And again, I'll just recap this one really quick. It's just a little bit different. Has about one more step to it. So now we want to return the decorator, and that can be just called, or sorry, the wrapper function. So that can be called just like that, and backspace one more time, and we'll return the decorator now. So what's happening here is the decorator is going to be placed on top of a view just like we did before. So I'll actually pass it in really quick, and we'll actually write in our permissions, but let's go ahead and import that. And above our main page here, let's go to our home page. It's just above the user page. We're actually going to put this in under login required. So it goes downwards here. So this is going to be called first, and then allowed users is going to be called. So what we're going to do now is say for the home page, the only users we want to allow is the admins. So we're just going to say the only type of role is allowed is admin, but if we had some kind of another staff member, we could say staff. So we can pass in multiple roles to that decorator. So we're going to throw that in here. And first we're going to pass in the users, and then we're going to throw in this function. So home is going to be the view function. Then our wrapper is going to have some conditionals in here. And then we're going to decide if we want to return the function or redirect the user and so on. So make sure you have these indentations. So let's go ahead and actually write the logic here. Okay, so let's first make sure everything's working. So I want to make sure this wrapper was set up properly. So we'll just say working here, and we have it imported and it's above allowed users. So I actually want to print out the allowed roles really quick so we can see that. So we can actually see the list. So if we make sure our server is on and go to our main page, we're going to see our template being rendered and everything's working. So the decorator called that, and then our view was returned. So what we want to do now is set some functionality to make sure that a page is restricted. So we're going to set a variable called group, and this is going to be none. And then we're going to check if a user is part of a group. So if request.user.groups, and then we're just going to do the exists method here. So if the users, if a list of groups actually exists, so if we return a query set, then we want to go ahead and set the group value to the first group in the list. So we can actually make this a list of groups, but at this point, we're just going to have a user be part of one group. So we can just do user. Actually, I can just copy this right here. So group is going to be equal to request.user.groups.all, and we're just going to grab the first one in the list. So we're going to do the first one, so we're going to index it, and we're going to return the name. So at this point, group is now going to be set to whatever the name of that group is according to that user. So now we're going to do if group, so whatever group the user is a part of, if the group is in this allowed roles list, so if the name exists in here, so at this point, admin is in here, and we should be logged in as an admin user. So group is going to be equal to admin. So if admin is in allowed roles, which in this case it should be, then let's go ahead and return this function. If that's not the case, let's go ahead and restrict the page. We'll just say else, and we'll return this HTTP response. So we'll just say return HTTP response, and we'll say you are not authorized to view this page. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a test now. So our server's running, everything checks out, and if I go to the home page, users object, okay, something's not right here, request.users. It needs to be a single user, and we want to make sure that we didn't do that twice here. So we'll fix that, and now that should return the page for us. So we get the page back and everything checks out. But if we log in as a customer now, so John has John's group value here. So if we go here, John will be a customer. So we'll query the customer attribute, and this should be restricted. So if I go here as John, we are not authorized. But if I log in as Dennis, then we are. So at this point, let's go ahead and just restrict all of these pages. So we'll just do allowed users, and we'll put that over the products page. We'll do the customer page. We don't want a customer to be able to view all of our customers. And we'll just go down here and just go ahead and just put these over every page that applies here and delete. And I think that's everything. So we're going to have one small issue with our current setup right now. And that's the idea of right now when a user is logged in as a customer, because my dashboard is set to that default URL or that home URL, every time a customer is on the user page but then happens to go back or refresh, they're going to be sent to that dashboard, which they are restricted from. So this isn't the ideal way to fix this, but what I'm going to do is create an admin-only URL that is going to be put onto, or an admin-only decorator that's going to be put onto that view, the home view, and restrict a user from viewing it. So I'm actually just going to copy and paste one that I wrote, and then I'll place it on it. So I'll just explain what's going on. Basically, this is a decorator that takes in no parameters other than just the view, and we check the user group. So same thing like we did here. And what we're doing now is, because we only have two groups, again, this is a quick fix. It's kind of like a duct tape fix, so you don't want to do this in a real project probably. But we check the group type. So if the group is customer, we just send the user back to the customer page, and if the group is admin, then we allow them to be there. So we're going to grab this admin-only decorator, and we're going to run an import really quick, and we'll just throw that next to admin-only there, or allowed users, and then we'll go to the home page, and we'll keep this allowed users decorator everywhere else, but for this page, we're just going to do admin-only. So what's going to happen here is when we go to this view, we're first going to check if that user's logged in, then we're going to see if they're a customer or an admin, and then we'll redirect them. So now if a customer goes back to that page, you'll notice it just quickly refreshes them back to the user page. So that's how we fix that. So now what we want to do is make sure that anytime a user is created, that they're associated with the group automatically. Now, this is something we can normally do with Django signals, and probably should do that. And I'll probably save that for another video. But what we'll do here is actually in the user creation method, we'll actually go ahead and query a group and attach a user to that group. So the first thing we'll do is run a quick import. So just under this login required, I'm going to go ahead and do from django.contrib.auth.models import, and we'll import that group model. So we'll do group here, and down here now what we can do is first, actually it's in the register page. First, I'm going to go ahead and set the user to be the value of that saved form, and it'll be user, not users. And we'll go ahead and change this to username. And just to make sure we don't get errors, we need to change that to username, and we'll attach the username there. So now what we can do is query the group. So the group will be group.objects.get. And when a user signs up, we want them to be automatically associated as a customer. So we'll add some kind of a registration page for an admin later. But for this point, or at this point, what we're going to do is just say name is going to be customer, and they'll automatically be associated with that group. So now that we have that, we can just do user dot groups dot add, and all we need to do is throw in the name of that group or that group instance, and that should go ahead and create a group on registration. So, or associate a user with a group. So if I just log out and go here, and we'll just create a user called Steve, and then we'll do steve@gmail.com, and I'll just go ahead and set a password and verify that. Now, when we register the user, Steve was created, and when I log in, this should automatically associate user or Steve with a customer account. So Steve is now logged into the customer page and not into the main admin panel. So the last thing I'm going to do here is go ahead and just remove this right here from our navigation bar. So I have that stored in my templates and in this navbar.html. So what I'm going to do is check if that user is an admin, and if they are, we'll go ahead and load in these pages, these two links, and if they're not, we won't add them. So we'll just write a little if statement here. Can't get this right. So if request.user.is_staff. So that's what we're actually going to use, that is staff attribute right now. Again, this probably isn't the best way to do this for our current setup, but it's just showing you different ways here so you can actually decide for yourself what method you want to use. So we'll end for there. So if the user is staff, go ahead and show these two pages. If they're not, and don't render them. Now if I refresh, that should hide them. So end for, oh, it should be end if, not end for. So end if, and if I refresh this, now that should work. So those two menu items are hidden, but if I log in as Dennis, because Dennis does have that staff attribute, we'll go ahead and render those out. So in the next video, we'll actually go ahead and build out that user profile, and we'll finish all that up and actually attach a user as a one-to-one relationship to a user and a customer. But a lot of this authentication I'll probably cover towards the end of the series, and we'll put this into Django middleware. So it's a much more advanced topic, but it's a really good way of actually handling all this. So make sure you're subscribed, and thank you for supporting the channel.